Hello and welcome to Citizens Hour. This program is coming to you from West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM Dakar, Senegal, and on our partner stations across the sub-region and on all of our social media platforms. I am Imo Edet, your anchor. Welcome. Last week on the program, we had our first edition of the debate since a change of name. This edition will be examining matters arising in governance across the sub-region. But first, we will take a review of top stories that made headlines during the week. And Christopher Aticho will take us through that as we cross over to Accra. Hello, Chris.
Hello, Imo, and to our listeners, welcome to the program. And for this week's review, we would like to start in Ghana, where I am at the moment, as political tensions are flaring, especially as we head into the general elections. Well, part of this tension is the refusal of the country's Electoral Commission (EC) rejecting a request by the opposition National Democratic Congress (NDC) for a live broadcast of the engagement on Friday, September 6, 2024. Over discrepancies the party has identified in the provisional voter register in order to ensure transparency and a general process ahead of the December polls. The opposition NDC and other election watchers have raised series of inconsistencies about the voter register, such as illegal voter transfer, deletion of names and multiple registration, among others, observed in the just-ended voter exhibition exercise. Yet, the EC remains adamant to these concerns. Here is the Deputy Director of Elections for the NDC, Madi Jibro.
It has become necessary because we are dealing with an institution where anytime we raise issue, there will be counter response to the issue, making the thing look like what we raise not true. And this is also the core of our election. At this point, Ghanaians need to know what actually is happening. So if it's live, it will save all of us from meeting behind the closed door, then coming to say a different thing out to the public. But it will be interesting. Remember when Peace Council came to our office to meet NDC, in fact, without informing us of live telecast, but we gave them opportunity to telecast it live recording. In fact, it has saved the country a lot because now everybody knew what Peace Council came to say at the NDC party office. So when we said live, it's the NDC is presenting something. So Ghanaians will know firsthand that, yes, this is what NDC has presented, this is what is also responding. It will save all of us better. But the judgment will be for Ghanaians at that point. Because you remember when Dr. Bosma had the press conference, he told the whole world that if they have nothing to hide, will they give us the register? We are also saying that because we believe in what we are saying, that can have an impact on the election. Give us a live telecast if you have nothing to hide.
Staying in Ghana, the Electoral Commission has said it will not shield any official involved in election malpractices. During a press conference in Accra, the Commission provided an update on its investigations into unauthorized voter transfer. The Commission's Northern Regional Directorate reported that some voters from 2 polling stations in the Tamale South constituency and 1 polling station in the Sanerugu constituency were allegedly transferred to the Posiga constituency in the Upper East region without their knowledge or consent. The Commission has also denied the allegation that it is manipulating the voter register to favor any political party. WADR's Jide Akintunde brought us that report.
The EC confirmed that unauthorized voter transfers occurred in the Tamale South and Sanerugu constituencies. According to Deputy Chairperson of the EC, Dr. Bosman Asare, who addressed the press briefing in Accra on Monday, preliminary investigations revealed that 38 voter transfers were carried out using the credentials of an Electoral Commission official.
The records of those transfers are captured in the voter management system's audit logs. A look at the verification done during the transfer process shows that the photos of the voters from their voter ID cards were used for facial verification and to effect the transfers.
To prevent future occurrences, the Commission says it has introduced a liveliness check feature to ensure that only live present individuals are verified for transfers. Additionally, the Posiga District Electoral Officer at the center of this has been suspended pending further investigations, with the Commission pledging to take all necessary action to ensure transparency and integrity in the electoral process, as it denied claims of bloating the register to serve a particular party's interest, an allegation leveled against the Commission by the main opposition NDC.
The Commission would like to assure the public that it will not shield any of its officers, both permanent and temporary, found complicit in any electoral malpractices, and will always allow such persons to face the full rigors of the law. It is also absolutely untrue that the Commission has added names to the voters' register in a bid to rig the elections for a particular party. Those allegations are without merit and should be disregarded by the public.
The Commission also emphasized that the provisional voter register is not final and that the exhibition exercise is meant to correct errors. It has committed to ensuring a credible final register for the 2024 general elections and reaffirmed its dedication to transparency and fairness in the December 7, 2024 elections.
Away from Ghana to another West African country where political tension is cooking up is Senegal. This is because of the government's plan to abolish two-state institutions. Through the week, this has been the bane of discussion among parliamentarians dominated by the opposition. The political atmosphere is heating up with tensions on their rise, particularly over the upcoming Declaration of General Policy, DPG, by the Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko. An extraordinary session of Parliament has been scheduled for September 11 to address this. The Conference of Presidents of National Assembly, now dominated by the opposition party, Benobok Yaka, BBY, has set the date for this presentation. Augustine Colley completes the story.
Ayeb Dafe from the Yeri Askanwi Group, which is close to the government, confirmed the decision but criticized it as a violation of Article 97 of the Rules of Procedure, urging the Prime Minister not to proceed on that date. On Wednesday, President Bassirou Diomaye Faye convened an extraordinary session in response to the opposition's threat, led by BBY, to table a motion of censure against Ousmane Sonko's government. Earlier that day, Sonko stated that there will be no censorship against his government team. On September 2, Parliament rejected a bill to abolish the Economic, Social and Environmental Council and the High Council of Local Authorities. Following this rejection, President Diomaye Faye dismissed the presidents of these two institutions.
Let's head to Nigeria, where the petroleum scarcity is biting hard across the country amidst a hike in the price of the commodity. The prices now range from 855 naira in Lagos to 897 naira in Abuja, less than $1 at the major petroleum stations, while the independent petroleum stations are charging between 995 naira and 1,000 naira per litre. In this report on the fuel crisis in Africa's most populated country, WADR's Usman Umar spoke with private car owners, commercial car drivers and commuters to get a feel of how the crisis is affecting them.
The usual bustling streets of Abuja were scanty throughout the day. Places with typical traffic gridlocks witnessed fewer vehicular and pedestrian movements. Many car owners, including commercial and private owners, have opted to leave their vehicles at home due to the recent fuel price hikes that had led to hike in transportation fares. Many who decided to bring out their vehicles had to join the long winding fuel queues.
Even the route that we usually take for 100, 200 now, this morning while coming out, I was charged 300, 400 naira. One painful thing is the income have not increased, but yet the expenditure is increasing day by day.
It's affected because even us we have our own car where we queue for money from in the morning. I bought fuel yesterday around 4 o'clock, from 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock in the evening. And even how much will you buy? And if your budget you have a budget of 10,000 naira, what the 10,000 naira drive you? 10,000 naira fuel cannot drive you from here now to Kubwa, I would say.
As some lament the stress they have been subjected to, others are more concerned about the time wasted in fuel queues.
Are they here around 5:30 in the morning time where we just come up from Mosque, CBE Freya, I'm here. Up to now, I never see buy. You are selling for a litre 903 naira.
Meanwhile, the Vice President of Nigeria, Senator Kashim Shettima, has invited the Group Managing Director of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited and the National Security Advisor over the recent fuel price hike, the Nigerian Medical Association, The Nigerian Bar Association and other professional bodies have also issued statements urging the government to ensure the reversal of the fuel pump prices.
And those were some of the top stories that made headlines this week in West Africa. Back to you, Emo, in Dakar.
Thank you, Chris, for the review of stories that made headlines during the week.
Citizens Hour on West Africa Democracy Radio. It's your time to speak.
Welcome back. This is Citizens Hour. Our discussion this week centers on two issues: the Africa-China Summit, which ended in Beijing on Friday, and the launch of a new e-passport by the Burkina Faso government. But first, the FOCAC, which dominated discourse, culminated with the Chinese President Xi Jinping pledging to step up China's support across debt-laden Africa with funding of nearly $51 billion over 3 years, backing for more infrastructure projects and the creation of at least 1 million jobs. Let's also inform you that China also agreed to step up cooperation with the continent in the industry, agriculture, infrastructure, trade and investment. She told delegates from more than 50 African nations gathered in Beijing for the 3-yearly Forum on China-Africa Cooperation Summit. Well, for many, it goes beyond the cooperation. But what is in for Africans? Let's break this down as we bring on board our guest. Joining us this edition is Mr. Jide Akintunde. He is the Director, Nigeria Development and Finance Forum and Managing Editor, Financial Nigeria. We also have Micheal Nketsiah. Mr. Micheal is an international relations expert. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and a welcome to the program.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Good morning to all your listeners.
There have been several concerns about this Africa-China meeting in Beijing. First of all, what will be the expected takeaways from this meeting?
Good morning to your listeners. I would say that the takeaways are going to be in two directions. First, the direction of China, and then, of course, the participating African countries. For China, the takeaway will be that it will have more guarantee of access to mineral resources from Africa to continue to develop its economy and its industries. China also wants to leverage on the diplomatic back its agenda and to actually also show that it is not just emerging as a global economic juggernaut, but that it is also a major country in terms of international diplomacy. So it can have more backing for its position at the international fora, including at the UN General Assembly. So the visual of it, of gathering 53 leaders and having the Chinese president meet with them is really very powerful for China. So apart from the trade and the investment opportunity that they will get, I do think that the diplomatic one is also important for China. As for Africa, I think it is the same thing, the same desire for project loans and for Chinese FDI. I do think that these in themselves are not bad for the continent. It is just really that the dependency that is perpetual and that indicates that the continent is not making progress. I think that is where the worry is. Thank you.
Well, that's a very good point you've raised, Mr. Jide. I mean, we have seen several cooperations, several summits. We've seen Italy, we've seen America, well, which we will look at as we delve further into the conversation. Mr. Mike, let me come to you, please. Well, you heard the intro there, and it seems like every time the West or some big country sneezes, Africa will always want to react. And people are saying that China is just using African countries to expand, its capacity, its strength. But do you really think this is the case? And are they using this conference as a means to influence countries in Africa?
Well, good morning to all your listeners once again. You see, since the early part of the 21st century, China-Africa relations initially started with China so much in desperate desire for rest which African countries have or had or continue to have in abundance. But I believe that in the second decade of the 21st century, and with the emergence of the COVID-19 economy and other geopolitical factors like trade sanctions, American-led trade sanctions on the Chinese economy, which were intensified during the administration of former President Donald Trump. Actually, those policies, some of them were enacted during the latter part of the Obama administration. They took so much heat during the Trump administration, and they've continued a bit under Joe Biden. And with all these sanctions on China, the relation with Africa is no more going to be just about the demand for resources to China to feed its industries and productivity. China is producing a lot. It is actually overproducing as we are speaking today in terms of renewable energy alternatives like solar panels. Chinese companies have so overproduced that if they are to cease production today, they can still supply the global economy with solar panels for the next 9-10 years. There are other aspects of the Chinese economy that they've overproduced that they have nowhere to send these products to.
Other than Africa.
Yes, companies are actually paying for the cost of keeping some of their products in warehouses without getting without getting countries to export them to. And this basically being caused by high levels of American and European economic sanctions, higher tariffs. They've raised their tariffs on some Chinese goods because they believe the Chinese are flooding the market. They are practicing unfair, or they are initiating unfair trade practices. So they've risen their tariffs or increased tariffs, making it highly uncompetitive for Chinese to enter America and other European countries. So the Chinese are doing what I would call industrial re-engineering, looking for alternative markets to flood some of their goods. And Africa undoubtedly is a very, very large market for the Chinese economy. Of course, we have the population that is almost similar to that of the Chinese, more than 1 billion population in Africa, youthful in nature. And ours is an economy on the horizon, economy that is not fully developed, but an economy that is growing and about developing. So for everything that is produced in China, the African economy needs is the most compared to Europe, America, North America, Latin America, and other parts of the world where they have the technological means and capability to produce some of these basic things that the Chinese economy keeps producing. So, of course, it is not just about resources. They are now looking for alternative markets to flood their products in. And Africa presents an ideal economy for all these Chinese products. And we also know that currently, beyond the economic diplomacy, currently we know happenings in the world where some very global powers, led by Russia, militarily, led by China economically, and to some extent led by Iran also, are trying to challenge the hegemonic dominant keeps organizing these annual China-Africa summits to politically and economically form higher and stronger ties with African countries.
Is it about the natural resources in this case?
Mike was actually quite correct in saying that at the beginning of this cooperation between Africa and China, at the beginning of this millennium, it was essentially for China how to source for mineral resources to fuel its industrial production. But China has been developing very, very rapidly, and in several sectors, it has actually caught up with the West. And so the change, the needs of China has been evolving over these years. So, like I had said, China is looking to strengthen its diplomatic power, and the visual, of that, that is what FOCAC delivers these days. Let us also look at the very fact that during this meeting, China has said that it will be lending in its currency, the yuan, as opposed to the dollars.
What is this supposed to mean, Mr. Jide? What is this supposed to mean?
Yes, it means that China is also looking at strengthening its currency and making a yuan an increasingly convertible currency for global trade. You are not yet a global economic superpower if your currency is not widely accepted for trade. So China is still looking at that as well. I think that these things are legitimate aspirations for China. Quite frankly, I do not begrudge China for Africa. I think that they have defined very astutely and with foresight their needs, and so they are pursuing it, and we can see the consistency with which they are doing it. Of course, the opposite side is Africa. What are we looking for in this? But I think that may be answered in your subsequent question. But right now, for China, they are looking to strengthen their economic power. They want to project increased diplomatic strength, and they also want to strengthen their currency, as well as continue to guarantee access for their products.
Well, Mr. Mike, last year, Ghanaian president, your president, rebuked some African leaders and asked them to stop begging from the West and the likes of China, Russia, and a host of others in order to earn global respect and change poor perceptions about the continent. We also saw, we heard the Burkinabe strongman, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, also, towing in that line. Like I mentioned earlier, it has become a norm that when one country, can call the entire African continent for a meeting, and we haven't had, a reversal of that. Well, do you agree in this case that African leaders should stop begging?
All that I want to put across is that even China, for all its economic might, production might, and capabilities, it is not a country that can survive on its own. Of course, it needs to trade with the rest of the world, and African leaders and African economies also have to do the same. However, the unfortunate incidents of overdependence on foreign aid, where we basically beg some of these major global powers and superpowers for aid, for loans. Even loan on its own is not a bad thing. The American economy is indebted to so many creditors. The Chinese economy, of course, is also indebted to other creditors. But the overdependence on some of these things, and what has virtually been turned into begging for development assistance, it needs to cease. We have to put our house in order. We have to start developing long-term policies and goals that can bring development to not just the economy, but to the ordinary people in our respective African countries. And I believe any call for African nations or African economies to stop overdependence, begging, is a call or a step in the right direction. However, that does not prevent them from trading with the rest of the world. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Jide, do I agree to this? African leaders begging.
Look, let me present a view that is slightly different. Yeah, okay. I believe that there is a begging, but it is actually not Africans that are doing the begging. It is China. So if you look at the FOCAC is not an initiative of Africa. You see, to beg is to suggest that you are the one who took the initiative. But this is China's initiative. It is China that is, quote unquote, begging for access to its resources because it has a strategy to develop its economy. And it has a strategy for ensuring that its local manufacturers are exported to markets so as to strengthen its economy. So really, the narrative should be that the Africans are just being invited to another man's show. This is what it is. Of course, when you come like that, they will give you takeaway. They'll give you some food to go with. But this initiative is China's, and again, like I said, I do not begrudge it because they have a strategy, they have the initiative, and they are doing what they should do. So when it was just simply for them to focus on having access to energy commodities to fuel their own internal production, they do that. When they have now expanded their goal in the global economy and in global diplomacy, we see that they are tweaking their strategy. And when we see that they also need the yuan to become a convertible currency so that China can trade better, and express the strength of its economy with its currency, then we see that they are also taking the necessary step. So again, this begging is strategic. Africans are not the one begging. They are just simply invited, and they are co-traveling with somebody, with a country that has a solid agenda for its long-term development and global leadership.
Let's talk about the fact that China is increasing its investment in the continent, and Mr. Micheal did mention something, encouraging Africans to absorb more of Chinese goods, which we are seeing. I mean, the African market is flooded with Chinese products. What exactly and why exactly is this cooperation so important for both sides? Mr. Jide, let me start with you with this question, please.
Well, it's the importance of this for China is clear. The importance of this for Africa, it's not clear at all, because we have not seen an attempt to make the most of this initiative and this platform for cooperation and trade. And part of the difficulty is that when we talk about China-Africa relation, you see, on the other side, you have clear-cut a nation. But on the other side, you have 53 nations. And we presume that the 53 nations have the same aspiration, are at the same stage of their development, but they are not. So it becomes very difficult to measure the impact of China's engagement with Africa, by looking at it continentally. If you look at the structure of China's FDI to Africa and its loans, you will find out that it is highly concentrated in just a number of countries. So it is not as widespread as it is. China discriminates on the basis of where there is access to the mineral resources that it wants. So this is just my view about it. If we delve into the relations at country to country level, at bilateral level, maybe it will become quite clearer what the benefits have been for Africa. But to just look at it as China to Africa, it's a bit more difficult, other than just looking at big numbers like trade expansion at a continental level, which of course has been expanding. China is the largest trading partner for Africa as a continent. China is the largest bilateral creditor even globally, and this also reflects in Africa. But whether the continent is making the most of it is a different matter altogether.
Well, Mr. Micheal, can you take it off from there? Is the continent making the most of this cooperation? And like Mr. Jide mentioned, it differs countries to countries, and which is also making the continental free trade arrangement very difficult in the continent. Your point on this, or your views on this?
Well, I think to begin with, let me also I try to correct an impression that my colleague tried to put across. My argument has never been for the fact that African countries are begging China currently. All that I sought to portray was that there is nothing wrong within the international arena. There's nothing wrong with some of these economic arrangements. Calling for a summit with other African countries is a form of economic diplomacy. There is nothing wrong with it. China needs our resources. We need their finished goods and products, and we also need their technology. An exchange of our resources for their finished products is not begging, but there are instances where African countries have portrayed extreme issues of over-dependency, over-begging, where we don't want to do anything on our own, and we appear to be relying on some of these global superpowers, China, America, and other parts of the West, for our basic necessities. Some of the most funded critical infrastructure developmental needs on the continent are virtually funded for free by some of these superpowers. We go begging, talk about malaria, the 6 killer diseases, maternal mortality, and issues of sanitation, cholera. All these are mostly funded by these countries because we go begging them, and that has been my argument, that we have to get to a stage where we don't have to over-depend on them for resolution to some of these issues. However, going forward, like he rightfully said, yes, these global superpowers, they do not come out with an economic policy necessarily to benefit the African economy or the African continent. First and foremost, in the international arena, everything is about interest. The principal and foremost agenda of the Chinese administration is to come out with policies, either domestically or globally, that will benefit the Chinese economy and the Chinese people. It is about our interest. So when they throw some of these economic summits to us, it is the responsibility of our African leaders to thoroughly scrutinize some of these agreements, make sure that we cross the T's and dot the I's, that every single proposal goes not just to the benefit of China, but also to the benefit of every African country that will become a signatory to any form of agreement. So if China is proposing a swap deal like we had in Ghana, we call something gold for oil. Ghana has the gold, we need oil. So instead of buying with the dollar, he talked earlier about the dollarization of the African economy. Everything is determined now by the dollar. Go to Nigeria, they are having genuine and serious issues of inflation, even with regards to oil imports. This is a country that is supposed to be the largest exporter of crude oil in Africa, that they are importing refined oil. And then everything in Nigeria, economically, high levels of inflation because of what economists call the dollarization of the economy. We import almost everything with the dollar, and China is offering a different alternative. Let's trade in the local Chinese yen. That is what they are bringing on board. But of course, African leaders should not be found fooled into just easily partnering with their Chinese counterparts. They have to scrutinize and make sure that every single policy proposal that the Chinese are bringing on board is going to benefit the African economy and the African people, and that should be the standard and the way forward.
Well, as we round up this conversation, Mr. Jide, would there be much benefits, or can you compare the benefits as to Africa trading with the dollar and with the yuan?
It will come as some form of relief to the African economy. Number one, in the last decade, for the past 10 years, China has been Africa's largest trading partner. China currently is Ghana's largest trading partner, and I believe rightly so that although I don't have the data, China, a currency shift from the dollar to the yen, it is going a lot of pressure on the local Ghana. Inflation and adverse socio-economic challenges for the local economy. So I believe that is going to really augur well for the local economy. Why should we go to China to go and trade in dollars when they have the Chinese yen? And that will come as a huge relief to the African economies.
Mr. Jide, let's look at this case, the cons and pros to this.
Okay, so I am definitely not going to argue for the status quo with regards to the structure of Africa's trade. So this structure, in the meantime, is that we export raw commodities and then we import finished products from everywhere, including China. So when we talk about the use of yuan for Africa-China trade, essentially, again, we are pursuing the same structure of trade. So I think that one of the reasons why Africa itself is taken to be very unserious is that, this FOCAC forum started in the early 2000s. And if the relations with China has been deepening over the period of 3 decades now, what has been the shifts in Africa's own engagement? If you are going to engage with China as a country, as a bloc, so why can't Africa also say that we want to have our own currency? So just like China is now advocating the use of the yuan for China's products, how about an African continental currency as well? I mean, I know that is far-fetched, but it is far-fetched because, again, we are just tagging along. There is no advantage whatsoever to trading in the yuan as opposed to trading in the USD, because both will just still foster the same dependency. And for African countries who might take the lead in the adoption of the yuan, they can also expect that there might be some backlash from the dollar front. So really, there's really nothing there. I mean, everything that is there is for China. I don't see what it is meant for Africa. We need to strengthen our local currencies in the meantime, because we are essentially an import-dependent economy as a whole. So the strength of our local currency is more important than the foreign currency that we adopt for our importation, because our currency would ensure that if it is relatively strong, and I argue for a relatively strong currencies for African countries, only to the extent that at this time we are import dependent for basic needs. So you have got to make those imports cheaper and affordable for the people by managing your currency in a very good way to ensure that the value of it is strong to protect your consumers. So so we will watch the yuan, even though it is gaining more power as a global currency, but it is still early morning, for it. It has a long way to go in catching up with the US dollar. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Jide, since you're on the mic, your final word. Do you think Africans are feeling all of these cooperations, infrastructure-wise? Do you think we are feeling it? Are you feeling it as an African? Mr. Jide, your last word on that.
Okay, so I'm not going to say that those investments are not felt at all in Africa, but I will only just argue that very few people benefit from those projects, even the so-called infrastructure projects, right? You know, so how many Africans, by the structure of our economy, actually are going to ride on a train? You know, how many of them? You know, how many of them are going to use the international airports that China has built? You know, so really, so there are people who directly benefit from this. There are people who benefit in a secondary way, you know, maybe through investment opportunities and all that. You know, but again, we cannot lean heavily on these type of investments because we are a continent of about 1.4 billion people. The $50 billion that China has pledged to invest over the next 3 years it's like a drop in the ocean, you know, considering the investment needs of the country. You know, so really, we should be thinking more about, you know, how our own local public finance, public investments would have widespread benefits to African countries, while just using whatever we get from investments such as those from China as like the icing on the cake.
Indeed. Well, Mr. Micheal, your last word on this. Are you feeling all of these investments and corporations that our government are bringing into the continent as an individual now?
Yes, I've visited so many African countries, and in Ghana here, and almost every African country I've been to, in the eastern part of Africa, in Ethiopia, almost everywhere, there are visible evidence of Chinese infrastructure in some of these countries. It is very true that we have a huge infrastructure deficit. Healthcare, roads, name them. They are prevalent and very genuine infrastructure issues that we have to address as a continent. However, that does not erode the fact that something little is being done about it, and all these bear the signature of Chinese infrastructure development on the continent. But that is not the panacea to our predicament. It is not the long-term solution. Like he rightly put it, we need to build up our local economies, shore it up into such a manner and means that we'll be able to address some of these basic infrastructure challenges without necessarily or always depending on China and other external or foreign powers. And I believe that, yes, the investment that the Chinese are offering, $50 billion in the next 3 years, it is a drop in the ocean, like he rightly said, but in the absence of nothing, one is an option. So we also have to explore that alternative as well. We just can't say that because it is not enough, we should simply say no to that investment. Even if it is not enough, we have to make use of the little that they are bringing us. And then going forward, we plan to get things done on our own ways, by our own means, and on our own terms. And that is the long-term solution that we should be pursuing.
Indeed. Mr. Micheal Nketsiah, thank you so much for your time and for talking to us on this issue. Mr. Jide Akintunde, thank you so much for your participation. I appreciate your time, and thank you both of you, and do have a great weekend.
Thank you very much.
Our guests have been Mr. Jide Akintunde, the Director, Nigeria Development and Finance Forum, and Managing Editor, Financial Nigeria. We also had Mr. Micheal Nketsiah, an international relations expert. Now, in this second half, we are looking at the e-passport launched by the Burkina Faso government. This new biometric passport is without the logo of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, further solidifying its breakaway from the regional bloc. The move comes after Burkina Faso, along with Niger and Mali, cut ties with ECOWAS, following military coups in the three countries. Now, several issues are tied to this launch of the e-passport, especially as many believe this may affect trade services, the movement of people and goods. Well, let's find out more on this as we are being joined by Emmanuel Yeboah, a research analyst with the West Africa Democracy Solidarity Network, WADR. Emmanuel, thank you so much for your time and for joining us.
All right. Thank you very much, Emmanuel.
All right, so let me start with the update and the current state of negotiation and plea by ECOWAS for the trio of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso to rejoin the bloc. So where are we in this regard?
I think that with your question, following the formal withdrawal notification on January 29th by the three Sahelian countries accusing ECOWAS of failing to support their fight against terrorism and while imposing inhumane, sanctions, ECOWAS in a gesture to make the trio reconsider their positions, lifted, the remaining sanctions at their heads of state meeting on February 24th. But it appears that the lifting of the sanctions did not convince the AES to renounce leaving the ECOWAS bloc. A number of things have happened post the announcement. One has to do with the formalization of the alliance of Sahelian states, which was done just the day before the ECOWAS heads of state meeting on July 6th. They have adopted an ECOWAS model where Mali will hold the rotating presidency of the AES for 1 year, while Burkina Faso will also host the organization's parliamentary summit, which is a little bit, similar to that of the ECOWAS model. But I think that ECOWAS appears to remain resolute in attempts to reintegrate the trio. Currently, as we speak, the heads of state have appointed Senegalese President Diomaye Faye and Professor Batili to lead, the negotiation and the mediation process to reintegrate the three countries back into the ECOWAS bloc. I see that they have made a number of visits to Mali. In May, some of these visits were done. Last month, Ousmane Sonko also made some visits to Mali. So ECOWAS is still in the process of mediation, trying to get the three countries integrated into the ECOWAS bloc.
How strong has this effort been so far?
I think that we all know that ECOWAS is facing some credibility crisis. Even the heads of states themselves, the credibility of the heads of states to lead the negotiation process, we think that was a little bit problematic, and so it was a bit of a relief with the announcement of Diomaye Faye to lead the process, because we all know the context to Diomaye Faye becoming president in Senegal, and so I think that there's been a renewal in some level of confidence that with Diomaye Faye, who is, as it were, wasn't part of the beginning of all of these crises about, a year ago or to about 4 years ago, you have some sense of excitement that, okay, well, this is a fresh breed that can, come up with some gains. But I think that we are hoping to see the formal withdrawal comes to an end. The notification comes to an end next year, January 29th. And as we speak, we have just about 4 months. There's not much time, but I think that there's a little bit of room for something to be done. So, yeah, we all wait to see what comes out from that negotiation or that mediation process in the next heads of state summit that will be held. But I think that to your question on the printing of the new passport, I think that the move, of course, undermines ECOWAS efforts to reintegrate the three countries. I mean, it symbolizes a concrete action towards severing the ties with the ECOWAS bloc. And I think that the new passport not only represents a departure from ECOWAS's symbolic unity, but also poses some practical challenges for regional integrations. And for me, I ask myself that what is going to be the implications of citizens of West Africa traveling to Burkina Faso with a new passport and the vice versa. The implications of Burkina Faso citizens traveling to other West African countries. So I think that the printing of the new passport or this new development actually brings a distortion in the entire protocol on free movement of trade and persons. And I think that the coming weeks or the coming days and weeks actually will be a difficult situation for the region with regards to national laws, that would have to be applied and all of those kinds of things. So there's much more that this new development will come up with.
I mean, you've raised a very interesting point about the trade, which takes us to my next questions. In the case of this, will there be a visa imposed on holders of ECOWAS? I mean, ECOWAS in particular, because of the context and circumstances that these two are in.
Well, thank you. I think that the current new development poses a lot of challenges, as we have already highlighted. Now that there's a new passport for citizens of Burkina Faso, there will certainly be repercussions on the protocol on free movement. Citizens of these countries are certainly going to lose their ECOWAS identity card. With this new development, and also with the formal withdrawal, the ECOWAS brown card, when this goes through, certainly will also, be affected. I mean, the vehicle insurance, I'm sure we are all aware of. So, in terms of the protocol on free movement of persons, certainly there will be some repercussions with this new development, and also with the formal withdrawal of the AES. These countries, maybe to paint a little more picture into the implications on trade, these three countries, particularly the AES, I mean, referring to the AES, are landlocked, right? They heavily rely on imports and trade routes through coastal ECOWAS member states.
Yes.
And the withdrawal from ECOWAS would certainly reintroduce some tariff barriers, some increase in transaction costs, making imports more expensive than it is now. The exports from leading economies such as Nigeria, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and Senegal to the AES actually is around $2.8 billion as of the year 2021, right? So if you're looking at imports from the biggest economies in West Africa to the AES, you are looking at around $2.8 billion according to the OECD in the year 2021. Now, conversely, combined revenue from exports from the AES to Nigeria, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal, referring to the biggest economies in West Africa in the same year 2021, was around $353.3 million, right, US dollars. And so if you are doing the analysis, of course, trade between the AES and the other ECOWAS states, will be impacted because you are looking at $2.8 billion that will be lost by a bigger steel economies as against that of the AES. And so certainly the withdrawal will bring, in essence, about 10% reduction in the region's market size, right? So that will certainly be a problem, in the coming weeks and the coming months. Again, the formal withdrawal of these countries will also result in the halt or the suspension of some projects that are invested in these countries, including Burkina Faso, worth more than $500 million. And we know that particularly Burkina Faso is plagued with a myriad of crises. So we are talking about insecurity, rising insecurity. We are talking about climate vulnerability. We are looking at, repression of rights and freedoms and economic access, particularly in Burkina Faso. The 3 countries as of June, when I did some analysis in terms of the security situation, you have about 3.1 million people internally displaced in the 3 countries, right? And 85% of this number, that's about 2.6 million, are internally displaced just in Burkina Faso. So out of the 3.1 million internally displaced persons in the 8 years, Burkina Faso has about 60% of this number. And interesting, 53% of this number are women.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
So you already have challenges, underlying challenges, that is being faced by Burkina Faso, and the repercussions that will come, the economic repercussions, the trade repercussions, the legal status of citizens that are living in other ECOWAS states. As we speak, Côte d'Ivoire has about 20 million citizens of West Africa living in Côte d'Ivoire. When you take Burkina Faso citizens and Malian citizens in Côte d'Ivoire, you are looking about 5 million people in Côte d'Ivoire.
That's a whole lot.
What is going to be what is going to be the implications of Burkina Faso citizens living in Côte d'Ivoire? What is going to be the implications of Burkina Faso citizens living in Ghana, living in Nigeria, and doing businesses in these countries? So I think that this whole thing will certainly take us back. We are in for some tough time as a region.
Yeah, if I may come in here, do you think this was really thought through by the Burkinabe government?
Well, I want to believe that they may have looked at the challenges that certainly the withdrawal will pose, and still have gone in to undertake this. I see all of these developments as a plan for regime security. Right.
Emmanuel, thank you so much for your insight. I appreciate your time, and do have a great weekend.
Thank you.
That was Emmanuel Yeboah, a research analyst with West Africa Democracy Solidarity Network, WADR. And that's how we wrap things up on this edition of Citizens Hour on West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM Dakar, Senegal. We would love to hear from you. Do send us an email to wadr@wadr.org. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to our listeners on our partner stations, Voice of Liberia FM 104.1 in Monrovia and Kwateka Radio 100.9, Bon County. In Ghana, we say thank you to our listeners on Radio Pod, Savannah Region, Royals FM, Wenchi, and Focus FM, Kumasi. We also thank our listeners on Albaraka Radio, 97.5 FM, Bauchi, Northeast, and Darling FM, 107.3, Owerri, Southeast Nigeria, and on African Young Voices, 101.6, Freetown, and Radio Baf, 91.3 FM, Mile 91 in Sierra Leone, and Hilltop Radio in the Gambia. Do join us next week for another edition. I am Imo Edit. Bye for now.